After telling his best friend he is gay, he was betrayed in the most unthinkable way. The Montana winter was particularly harsh that December evening, when James Anderson's life changed forever. At 24, he had finally gathered the courage to tell his best friend, Mike Stevens, his deepest secret. They'd been friends since middle school, shared everything from camping trips to family holidays, and Mike was like a brother to him. What James didn't know was that this confession would set in motion a chain of events that would expose a decade-old secret, one that would shake their small town of Whitefish, Montana, to its core. The twist wasn't in Mike's reaction to James's coming out. It was in what Mike already knew, and why he'd been waiting for this moment for years. James and Mike met in 7th grade when the Stevens family moved to Whitefish from Seattle. Mike was the new kid, struggling to fit in, and James was the friendly face who offered to show him around. They clicked instantly, bonding over their love of hiking, fishing, and video games. Their friendship grew stronger through high school. They were inseparable, spending weekends at each other's houses, going on camping trips with their families, and supporting each other through the ups and downs of teenage life. When James's father died in a logging accident during their sophomore year, Mike was there every step of the way, helping James and his mother through their grief. "You're my brother, man," Mike would often say. Blood couldn't make us any closer. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect friendship, something darker was brewing. Throughout high school and college, James struggled with his sexuality. Growing up in a small Montana town wasn't easy for someone questioning their identity. He dated girls occasionally, trying to fit in, but it never felt right. Mike was always supportive when James's relationships didn't work out. "You just haven't found the right person yet," he'd say, patting James on the back. "Don't worry about it." What James didn't know was that Mike had discovered his secret years ago, during their senior year of high school. He'd accidentally seen messages on James's phone, conversations with an online support group for closeted gay teens. But Mike had kept this knowledge to himself, waiting and watching. After college, they both returned to Whitefish. James took over his father's small construction company, while Mike worked as a local reporter for the town newspaper. Their friendship continued, but something had shifted subtly. Mike began asking more personal questions about James's love life, pushing him to open up. They were at Mike's apartment, watching football and having beers, when James finally decided to tell him. His hands were shaking as he turned off the TV and faced his best friend. "Mike, I need to tell you something," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm gay." Mike's reaction seemed perfect, supportive, understanding, exactly what James had hoped for. They talked for hours, with Mike asking questions about how long James had known, whether anyone else knew, and how he was feeling. "I'm glad you told me," Mike said, hugging him. "This doesn't change anything between us." But it changed everything. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days later. James noticed people at the grocery store giving him strange looks. At the construction site, some of his workers seemed uncomfortable around him. He brushed it off as paranoia until his mother called, crying. "Someone posted about you on the town's Facebook page," she said. "James, they're saying horrible things." The post was anonymous, but it detailed James's coming out to Mike, along with other private information only Mike could have known. The comments section had exploded with a mix of support and hatred, but what hurt most were the business-related comments suggesting people should avoid hiring a gay contractor. When James confronted Mike, his friend seemed genuinely shocked and angry about the post. He even offered to write an article for the newspaper condemning the online harassment. "I'll help you find out who did this," Mike promised. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. More anonymous posts appeared, revealing intimate details about James's life. His business started losing clients. Someone spray-painted slurs on his truck. Through it all, Mike was there, offering support and promising to help track down the culprits. But something wasn't adding up. The anonymous posts contained information that only Mike could have known. When James tried to trace the source of the posts, all roads seemed to lead nowhere, as if someone with experience in online communication had carefully covered their tracks. Then came the blackmail letter. The letter arrived at James's office, demanding $50,000 to stop the harassment. The writer claimed to have more damaging information about James and his family. What caught James's attention wasn't the demand, it was the paper. He recognized the watermark from the local newspaper where Mike worked. That's when James started digging deeper into his best friend's life, and what he found shocked him to his core. Mike Stevens wasn't who he claimed to be. The story about moving from Seattle was a lie. There was no record of the Stevens family ever living there. In fact, Mike's real name was Michael Pearson, and he had a history of similar schemes in other small towns across the Northwest. His pattern was always the same: befriend vulnerable people, gain their trust over years, then use their secrets for blackmail. He was patient, willing to wait years for the perfect moment to strike. James wasn't his first victim. He was just the latest in a long line of betrayals. But Mike had made one crucial mistake this time. He'd gotten too comfortable, too confident in his long game. He hadn't counted on James having resources of his own. James went to the FBI with his evidence. The federal agents were particularly interested because Mike's activities crossed state lines and involved cyber harassment. They discovered that Mike had pulled similar schemes in Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, always targeting people in small communities where trust was valued and secrets were currency. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Mike kept detailed journals of his schemes, documenting how he chose his victims, how he gained their trust, and how he exploited their vulnerabilities. James's name appeared in entries dating back to their first meeting in middle school. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. During their investigation, FBI agents discovered that Mike had a connection to James's family that went back before they even met. Mike's father had worked at the same logging company as James's father. In fact, he had been present the day of the accident that killed James's father. The accident hadn't been an accident at all. The truth was almost too horrible to believe. Mike's father had been responsible for the logging accident that killed James's father. He had cut corners on safety procedures, leading to the fatal incident. Rather than face consequences, he had covered up his role and moved his family away. But years later, consumed by guilt, Mike's father had confessed everything to his son before taking his own life. Instead of coming forward with the truth, Mike had formulated a long-term plan for revenge. He blamed James's father for his own father's suicide, and he had spent years plotting the perfect way to destroy James's life. Becoming James's best friend, gaining his trust, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It had all been part of an elaborate revenge scheme years in the making. James insisted on confronting Mike himself, wearing a wire for the FBI. They met at their usual spot, a local bar where they'd spent countless evenings together. The conversation started normally, but then James laid out everything he'd discovered. Mike's reaction was chilling. Instead of denying it, he laughed. "You want to know the funny part?" Mike said, his voice cold. "I actually started to like you somewhere along the way. But that didn't change anything. Your father destroyed my family, and I've spent 15 years making sure I could destroy his son." "My father died in an accident," James said, his hands shaking. "No, your father died because my father cut corners to save money, and then couldn't live with the guilt. One father dead in an accident, another by his own hand. Seems fitting that both sons should suffer too." The FBI arrested Mike that night. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His journals, the blackmail letters, the online harassment, and his own recorded confession. But the investigation didn't stop there. The case opened up old wounds in the community. Other victims of Mike's schemes in different towns came forward. The logging company accident was reinvestigated, leading to long overdue accountability for the safety violations that had really killed James's father. Mike pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges of cyberstalking, blackmail, and fraud. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. But for James, the resolution of the case wasn't the end of his journey. The town of Whitefish rallied around him. The same Facebook page that had been used to spread hate became a platform for support. His construction business not only recovered but grew as people deliberately chose to work with him to show their support. More importantly, James found the courage to live openly as himself. The secret that Mike had tried to use as a weapon became a source of strength instead. The hardest part for James wasn't the betrayal of his sexuality. It was coming to terms with the fact that his entire childhood friendship had been a lie. Every memory, every shared moment, every confession and conversation had been part of Mike's long game of revenge. But as he worked through this with his therapist, James came to an important realization. While Mike's friendship had been fake, James's had been real. His capacity to trust, to care, to be a true friend. These weren't weaknesses to be ashamed of, but strengths to be proud of. 2 years after Mike's arrest, James stood before a group of high school students, sharing his story. He talked about trust and betrayal, about the importance of being true to yourself, and about how hate can consume a person's life if they let it. Mike spent 15 years plotting revenge, he told them. He wasted his life trying to destroy mine. But in the end, the truth came out, and I'm still standing. I'm still me. James's story became a catalyst for change in Whitefish and similar small towns across Montana. It sparked conversations about acceptance, about the dangers of holding on to hate, and about the importance of supporting one another. The logging company implemented stricter safety protocols and created a scholarship fund in memory of both James's and Mike's fathers. James used his platform to advocate for both LGBTQ+ rights and workplace safety, turning his personal tragedy into a force for positive change. Today, James Anderson still lives in Whitefish, running his construction company and mentoring young people who struggle with their identity or with trust issues after betrayal. He's in a happy relationship and has rebuilt his life on a foundation of honest relationships and open communication. The town has changed too. The experience taught the community valuable lessons about jumping to conclusions, about the power of support over hatred, and about the importance of looking beneath the surface of even the most trusted relationships. The story of James Anderson and Mike Stevens is more than just a tale of betrayal. It's about the devastating power of generational trauma, the danger of letting revenge consume your life, and the strength it takes to remain true to yourself in the face of hatred. It's about how the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually comes to light. It's about how the weapons others try to use against us, our secrets, our differences, our trust, can become our greatest sources of strength. Most importantly, it's a reminder that while betrayal can break our hearts, it doesn't have to break our spirit. James often thinks about that winter night when he came out to Mike, how he thought it was the scariest moment of his life. Now he knows it was actually the moment he started breaking free. Not just from his own secrets, but from the web of lies Mike had spent years weaving around him. The Montana winters are still harsh in Whitefish, but James no longer fears what secrets the snow might be hiding. He's learned that the truth, however painful, is always better than the most comfortable lie. His story continues to touch lives, reminding people that sometimes the deepest betrayals can lead to the most profound transformations. In the end, James Anderson didn't just survive his best friend's betrayal. He emerged stronger, truer to himself, and more capable of real friendship than ever before. The twist that began this story, a decades-old tragedy that spawned years of calculated revenge, didn't end up destroying James as Mike had planned. Instead, it forced both the truth and James's true self into the light, proving that authenticity and honesty will always be stronger than hatred and revenge. This story serves as a powerful reminder that the people closest to us can sometimes harbor the darkest secrets, but also that being true to ourselves is always the right choice, even when it seems like the hardest path to take. It shows that while trust can be betrayed, the capacity to trust is itself a strength, not a weakness, and that living authentically is the best revenge against those who would use our truth against us.